Hello, I'm Jeff Morgan. You are listening to The Shadow of Tartarus, the first book in the Tartarus series. This is an authorized audio recording. If you're interested in the following story, please like and subscribe to my channel. A full list of my books are available on Amazon Kindle. Thank you and enjoy.
Chapter 3. The Experiment. The rumble of the helicopter's engine was a familiar comfort to Arthur Waite. It vibrated through the cockpit, steady and predictable, a stark contrast to the uncertainty of the mission at hand. He ran through his pre-flight checklist methodically. He simultaneously ticked off each safety measure while questioning the choices that had led him here. The day had begun with the strange Dr. Miles Myrdin banging on his hangar door. Dr. Myrdin, scientist, eccentric, and something of a mystery, had appeared with his enigmatic experiment and a promise that Arthur sensed could change his life. Arthur secured his shoulder holster with the .45 1911 Colt in his ruck. His rucksack was also packed with essentials: maps, a compass, emergency rations, and enough supplies to survive a crash in the barren desert. When it came to flying, his motto was, "You can never be too prepared." Myrdin sat quietly in the back with his wiry frame bent over a collection of odd-looking equipment. The man had an energy about him that defied his age. He had a kind of sharpness that gave the impression of being right on the verge of discovering something profound. "Ready to go, Doc?" Arthur asked over his shoulder. Myrdin looked up, his face alit with anticipation. "Ready when you are, Chief Waite. We've got a lot to do before nightfall." Arthur nodded, engaging the throttle. The rotor blades roared to life, kicking up a swirling cloud of dust as the helicopter lifted off the tarmac. As they flew northeast, the glittering city of Las Vegas spread out to Arthur's left. The Strip's towering hotels and flashing lights contrasted with the desolate expanse ahead. Myrdin leaned forward, peering out the side window. "Fascinating, isn't it? A city of excess built in the middle of nothing. Proof that humanity can thrive anywhere, even where it probably shouldn't." Arthur smirked. "Thriving might be a stretch. Half the folks down there are drowning in debt or bad decisions." Myrdin chuckled. "Perhaps, but they're also gambling on possibilities, on hope. There's something admirable about that, in its own way." Arthur didn't reply, concentrating on the terrain ahead. The bleak wasteland seemed infinite. It was a sea of ochre and gray under the clear afternoon sky. He glanced down at the map on his kneeboard attached to his leg. He flew up the state road looking for landmarks. "Remind me again why we're headed out here?" Arthur asked, his tone light but probing. "You'll see soon enough," Myrdin replied cryptically. The helicopter's steady thrum gave way to rhythmic thumping as Arthur Waite brought the aircraft into a hover. Beneath them stretched endless tracts of arid desert, an ocean of umber and brown interrupted only by jagged outcrops of rock and sparse vegetation. Arthur adjusted the controls, his sharp eyes inspecting the landscape below for a suitable landing site. "Somewhere flat, with enough space for the gear and the experiment," Myrdin said from the back, his voice barely audible over the steady vibration of the rotors. Arthur nodded, his eyes sweeping across the terrain. "Yeah, I got it. You've got a whole lot of nothing out here. It shouldn't be too hard to find a spot." Myrdin craned his neck to peer out the side window. "That clearing to the south," he suggested, pointing. "It looks adequate." Arthur adjusted the angle and banked gently toward the clearing Myrdin had indicated. Devoid of any obvious obstructions, it was just a flat stretch of dirt and rock. It would do. He brought the helicopter lower, the rotors kicking up a whirlwind of dust that obscured the ground. Having flown in much worse, the visibility drop didn't bother Arthur. His hands deftly maneuvered the controls, keeping the aircraft steady as he began the descent. "You might want to hang on back there," Arthur called over his shoulder, a hint of humor. "It's about to get bumpy." Myrdin, clearly excited, chuckled softly but didn't reply. He fixed his attention on the equipment stacked beside him. The helicopter touched down with a slight jolt, its skids sinking somewhat into the loose dirt. Arthur immediately began shutting down the engine, his movements precise and practiced. The roar of the rotors gradually faded, replaced by the gentle whine of the cooling system and the ambient quiet of the evening. He procrastinated in the pilot's seat for a moment, taking in the stark beauty of the landscape. The desert reached out in all directions. The seemingly infinite nothingness was both humbling and unsettling. Overhead, the sun hung low in the west. Its harsh light cast sharp shadows across the rocky ground. "Let the dust settle before you open the doors," Arthur advised. Myrdin nodded, appreciating the caution. The last thing they needed was a cloud of grit getting into the equipment or the helicopter's delicate mechanisms. As the circling dust began to dissipate, Arthur unlatched the door and stepped out. The ground crunched beneath his boots. The heat radiated upward in shimmering waves. He shielded his eyes against the glare, scanning around to get his bearings. "This is remote, all right," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Walking around to the other side of the helicopter, Arthur slid open the cargo door where Myrdin was already reaching for the first bag of equipment. "Need a hand with that, Doc?" Myrdin gave him a quick glance and smiled. "That would be appreciated, Chief." Arthur grabbed one of the heavier cases, hefting it onto his shoulder with a grunt. "What's in this thing, Rox?" Dragging the big bag across the dirt, Myrdin replied, "Sensitive instruments. Be gentle." Arthur rolled his eyes, but carried the case to the spot Myrdin had indicated. He set it down carefully, then straightened himself and adjusted his shoulders. "All right, what's next?" Myrdin gestured toward another piece of equipment still in the helicopter. "The generator. It's heavier, but crucial. We'll need it positioned close to the mast." "Of course, the generator," Arthur muttered, heading back to the helicopter. He crouched low to unstrap the bulky machine, his muscles straining as he lifted it out of the cargo bay. "I'm starting to think you brought me along as free labor." Myrdin chuckled, already unrolling the cylindrical bag that contained the segmented antenna mast. "I assure you, Chief Waite, your role in this endeavor is far more critical than that." Arthur shot him a skeptical look, but didn't argue. He carried the generator to the designated spot. He set it down with a heavy thud. Straightening up, he turned to see Myrdin, meticulously inspecting the pieces of the mast, his hands moving with the care and attention of a craftsman. Despite the heat, Myrdin seemed entirely unbothered, his focus unwavering. Arthur watched him for a moment, his curiosity piqued. For a man who spent most of his time in a lab, Myrdin had an air of confidence that suggested he was no stranger to field work. "You do this kind of thing often?" Arthur asked, grabbing another case from the helicopter. "Field experiments?" "Occasionally," Myrdin replied without looking up. "Though I do prefer the controlled environment of a laboratory. The desert offers unique opportunities, shall we say, though it comes with challenges." "Like what?" Arthur asked, setting the case down beside the generator. Myrdin paused, peering at him with a thoughtful expression. "Isolation, unpredictable conditions, and, of course, the need for a reliable pilot." Arthur smirked. "Glad I could be of service." With the equipment unloaded and the mast pieces laid out, the two men began assembling the antenna. Myrdin directed the process, his instructions clear and precise. Arthur followed along, his hands steady as they tightened clamps and secured joints. The mast slowly took shape, getting longer with each section they added. The structure was made of 4-foot poles painted olive drab green and held upright with guidelines. As they worked, Arthur couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Something about the whole setup felt, well, frankly, off. He wasn't sure if it was the strange design of the equipment, Myrdin's cryptic explanations, or the sheer remoteness of their location that left him suspicious. "You know," Arthur said, wiping sweat from his brow, If this thing starts glowing or shooting sparks, I'm going to need a little more information about what we're dealing with. Myrdin chuckled, his tone light but reassuring. Nothing so dramatic, I promise. The emitter is designed to operate within very specific parameters. It's perfectly safe. Arthur gave him a sidelong glance. Perfectly safe. Sure, that's exactly what I want to hear. Excellent, he said, clasping and rubbing his hands together. Now we connect the generator and calibrate the instruments. After that, we wait. Arthur glanced at the mast and then turned his eyes to the horizon. The sun was beginning to dip below the distant ridge. The desert floor was swallowed in shadow. All right, Doc, he said, rolling his shoulders. Let's see what this thing can do. Arthur leaned against the helicopter and watched as Myrdin calibrated his instruments. The hum of the generator had grown steady. It created a drone of sound in the otherwise muted landscape. So, Arthur began, breaking the tranquility. What's the story with all this? What exactly are we going to see? Myrdin paused, regarding the emitter with a knowing smile. I'm hoping for a breakthrough. More distinctly, I'm hoping to see a curvature in space. Arthur shrugged. His expression was neutral. You've got me flying out to the middle of nowhere, setting up an antenna that looks like something from a sci-fi movie. How about a little more explanation? Myrdin straightened, dusting off his hands before walking over to meet Arthur face to face. He gestured toward the antenna, the glow of the generator lights casting long shadows across the ground. This, he said with a weight of anticipation, is more than just an antenna. It's a gateway of sorts, a device designed to interact with what we might call the fabric of reality. Crossing his arms, Arthur raised an eyebrow. The fabric of reality? Doc, that's pretty vague too. Care to elaborate? Myrdin's mouth twisted, trying to figure out how much detail to offer. Have you ever heard of Einstein's theory of general relativity? The idea that space and time are interconnected like a vast, flexible sheet. Arthur nodded. Sure, space-time, gravity, all that. But I didn't realize they could be manipulated. They can, Myrdin said, his enthusiasm building. Now, imagine that sheet isn't just flexible, it's puncturable. With enough energy and the right kind of frequency, I can create an opening. If I can find the right frequency, I can bring two distant points closer together. Arthur's brow furrowed. Are you saying this thing makes a portal? Not exactly, Myrdin said, holding up a hand. The word portal tends to conjure images of magicians opening glowing doors and stepping through to another world. This is more precise, more controlled. It's like tuning a radio, but instead of sound waves, we're tuning space itself. Arthur let out a low whistle, glancing at the mast. And what happens if you tune it wrong? Myrdin's expression grew serious. That's why I've spent years refining the calculations. This isn't guesswork, Chief Waite. Every parameter, every frequency, is based on rigorous testing. The emitter on that mast is designed to send a signal into the fabric of space-time, creating a localized anomaly, a ripple. If the ripple is stable, it could theoretically allow me to observe or interact with points far beyond our current reach. Arthur studied Myrdin for a long moment, his skepticism evident. And by far beyond, you mean? Anywhere, Myrdin replied almost reverently. Other planets, other systems, perhaps even other dimensions. The possibilities are endless. Arthur adjusted the video camera. He aimed it at the mast. The hum of the generator seemed louder now, almost resonating with the pulse of his heartbeat. The desert had grown eerily still. This stillness broken only by the occasional breeze sweeping through the barren terrain. Myrdin stood a few feet away, his attention fixed on a handheld monitor. The device emitted a series of soft beeps. Its screen displayed a cascade of data Arthur couldn't begin to interpret. All systems are stable, Myrdin said clinically. The emitter is online. Now we wait. Arthur leaned back against the helicopter, the camcorder set to record the mast head and emitter. Wait for what exactly? A light show? Little green men to show up. Myrdin smiled, though his eyes never left the monitor. If I'm successful, you'll see a visible distortion, like heat waves rising off asphalt. That's the ripple. If the instruments detect a stable anomaly, we'll know the emitter is working as intended. And if it's not stable? Arthur pressed skeptically. Then I'll turn it off and reevaluate, Myrdin replied matter-of-factly. Failure is always a risk in experimentation, Chief Waite. But I assure you, I've accounted for as many variables as possible. Arthur exhaled through his nose. He looked with his right eye through the camcorder at the emitter, then opened his left eye to see the difference. The sleek structure glinted faintly in the moonlight, its surface catching the dim glow from the generator. Despite Myrdin's reassurances, an uneasy feeling twisted in Arthur's gut. Minutes passed in silence, the tension mounting with each passing second. Then, without warning, the hum of the generator grew louder. Its tone shifted into a low, vibrating thrum that seemed to reverberate through the air. "Here we go," Myrdin said with excitement. Arthur squinted at the mast, his camera still trained on the emitter. At first, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. But then, just above the mast, the air seemed to shimmer. It was subtle at first, like the distortion caused by heat waves. The effect quickly intensified, the shimmer growing denser and more vibrant. "I see it," Arthur said with amazement. "It's like liquid light." Myrdin's eyes lit up, and he gestured to Arthur to keep recording. "Yes, that's the anomaly. The ripple is forming. The instruments are picking up fluctuations in the electromagnetic spectrum. It's working." Arthur adjusted the camera's focus, his breath hitching as the distortion grew larger. The air above the mast seemed like a blue ball folding in on itself, creating a spiraling vortex of light and shadow. It was beautiful and unsettling all at once, like staring into the eye of a storm. The generator reached a crescendo, vibrating through Arthur's body. Myrdin was furiously typing on his monitor, his face awash with a mix of awe and concentration. "This is incredible," Myrdin blurted out. "The ripple is stable. The readings are extraordinary. We're witnessing a fundamental breakthrough in—" The words died in his throat as the anomaly suddenly pulsed, its light flaring brighter than ever before. "What the hell?" Arthur asked, instinctively stepping backwards. The vortex above the mast began to shift, its edges trembling as if under immense pressure. The distortion pulsed again, and Arthur felt the hair on his arms stand on end. The air around him crackled with palpable static energy. "Myrdin," Arthur said sharply, cutting through the growing noise. "Is this supposed to happen?" Myrdin's hands froze over the monitor, his face pale. "No, no, this isn't right. The ripple is destabilizing." "Then shut it down," Arthur snapped. Myrdin's fingers flew over the controls. He couldn't deactivate the emitter. The anomaly surged again. This time, the pulse was deafening, with a deep, guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of reality. Arthur barely had time to react before a massive object emerged from the vortex. The object hurtled out of the twisting light and struck the mast with a force that sent the entire structure crashing down. Arthur dove to the ground, landing beside the helicopter's strut as debris rained down around him. His breathing was ragged. His heart pounded against his ribs. The dust kicked up by the fallen mast hung thick in the air, filtering the moonlight. Arthur scanned the scene, his flashlight trembling in his hand. An eerie silence pressed in, broken only by the gentle sound of the wind brushing against the rocks. "Myrdin," Arthur called. His voice was rough. No response. He pushed himself to his feet, cautiously stepping toward the spot where the mast had stood only seconds before. His boots crunched against the gravel, the sound unnervingly loud in the void left by the sudden cessation of the generator and the other equipment. The mast was gone. The emitter was gone. The generator was gone. So was Dr. Myrdin. Arthur's pulse quickened as he scanned the area. His flashlight beam sliced through the dark. The place looked like a theatrical stage after the curtain had fallen, a strikingly empty stillness where moments ago, something extraordinary had been unfolding. Myrdin! Arthur called again, louder this time. The desert swallowed his cry. He moved quickly now, his flashlight sweeping back and forth. He checked the spot where the generator had been. He looked where the base of the mast was set. He found nothing. The antenna's footprint was bare, no debris, no fallen pieces, nothing to indicate it had ever existed. "This doesn't make any damn sense," Arthur muttered, his breath catching in his throat. He turned toward the helicopter, the familiar sight of its frame offering a fleeting sense of safety. Then his flashlight revealed the damage. The tail rotor was gone, sheared clean off. The rear section of the helicopter looked as though it had been sliced by a massive, precise blade. Arthur's stomach dropped. He moved close to inspect the damage, running his fingers along the sharp edge where the metal had been cut. It wasn't frayed or torn like he'd expected from an impact. It was clean, smooth, unnatural. "Good God," he whispered with jaw-dropping awe, standing where the tail had been. Arthur stripped off his jacket and reached into his rucksack. He pulled out his pistol and strapped the shoulder holster into place. The weight of the .45 Colt against his ribs was comforting. It was a small reassurance in the midst of chaos. He put his jacket back on and slid the 2 extra magazines into the pocket. Not sure what to do, he slung the rucksack over his shoulder. Arthur turned back toward the desert. He caught the glint of something on the horizon. He froze, squinting his eyes. At first, he thought it was a star low in the sky, but it moved, slowly, deliberately. What the hell? The object was massive, tubular, and impossibly large. Even at a distance, its scale was staggering. It glided silently over the ridge to the west, its silhouette cutting an ebony void against the starlit sky. A hazy glow of lights beneath the object cast an eerie halo, illuminating patches of the desert as it drifted toward a distant cluster of lights that hadn't been there before. Arthur's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but his feet carried him forward. One step at a time, he felt drawn as if by some invisible force. There was a mystery to solve, and up there, in the direction of those lights, Arthur was going to find answers.
The next chapter of this novel will be posted on my YouTube channel. My other books are available on Amazon Kindle. Thank you for listening.